Imagine walking through a bustling frontier town, the air filled with the clang of hammers, the laughter of children, and the cries of miners celebrating a successful strike. Then, as suddenly as life had begun, the wind howled with a force no one could fight. Mountains of sand swallowed streets, homes, and dreams. Entire families vanished, leaving behind only whispers of a town that once thrived, a town now buried beneath the relentless sands of the Old West. What happened to it? Why did no one return? And could it still be out there, hiding beneath the dunes, waiting to reveal its secrets? Welcome to Untold Golden History. Today, we uncover the haunting story of a lost town buried by the unforgiving elements of the Wild West. This is not just a tale of sand and wind. It is a story of hope, heartbreak, struggle, and the resilience of the human spirit, frozen in time beneath shifting dunes. In the mid-1800s, as America pushed westward, there was a surge of towns rising overnight, some thriving, some failing within years. Among these, the town we now call Sandhaven, its name lost in records, preserved only in letters and miners' journals, was born from the promise of gold, silver, and a better life. Miners arrived from the Appalachian Mountains, the Midwest, and even Europe, seeking fortunes that could change their families' destinies forever. Merchants and traders followed quickly, opening general stores, blacksmith shops, and saloons. Families settled, schools were built, and Sunday gatherings at small wooden churches brought a sense of community that most frontier towns never experienced. By 1875, Sandhaven had over 1,200 residents. Children ran through dusty streets, dogs chased chickens through town squares, and the rhythmic clatter of horseshoes against wooden planks became the soundtrack of daily life. This town, perched at the edge of the desert, seemed to defy the harsh landscape surrounding it. It thrived because its people believed in the impossible, that humans could carve permanence out of sand, wind, and sun. Yet the desert had a memory of its own. Travelers passing through nearby trails noted strange, almost mystical occurrences, sudden whirlwinds, shifting sands that could cover a wagon wheel overnight, and an eerie stillness that fell over the land before storms arrived. These were warnings that Sandhaven's founders did not, or perhaps could not, understand. Miners spoke in letters about veins of silver that shimmered like moonlight, and gold flecks as tiny as dust motes. Traders recorded profits in ledgers, marveling at the influx of prospectors who paid high prices for tools, clothing, and provisions. Families planted small gardens, irrigated by creeks fed from distant mountains. Even a few hardy fruit trees took root in the sandy soil, their leaves fragile but resilient. Life seemed perfect, almost storybook-like, yet nature had its plan. The first warning came quietly. Dust devils, those small spinning columns of sand, appeared more often and lingered longer. Then came the winds that no wooden plank or adobe brick could withstand. These were the legendary sandstorms of the Old West, the kind that could obliterate a town within hours if left unchecked. It began in early spring of 1882. A single storm rolled in from the northwest, fierce but brief. Residents laughed nervously, thinking it a mere annoyance. But within weeks, storms became a relentless force, battering streets, blocking windows, and collapsing poorly constructed buildings. Sand drifted into homes, covering furniture, floors, and personal belongings, as though the town were slowly being erased from existence. People tried to adapt. They built windbreaks from timber, dug trenches to divert dunes, and reinforced doors with whatever they could find. But the storms grew stronger with each passing month. Entire families were forced to abandon homes they had worked for decades to build. Miners left behind veins of silver they could never recover. Merchants shut shops, burying inventory in cellars, only for it to be lost to the ever-shifting sands. Letters and diaries from the time tell a story of heartbreak. One entry, dated April 12, 1883, by a resident named Clara Jensen, reads, "I woke this morning to find our kitchen buried halfway to the windowsill. Our beds were under 3 feet of sand. We could not reach the well, and the children cried as dust filled their mouths and eyes. Father says we must leave, but my heart refuses to go." By late summer, Sandhaven was a ghost town. Streets vanished beneath the dunes, homes were reduced to ridges of sand and splintered wood, and the wind carried the echoes of lives that had been erased. Some residents fled to nearby towns, while others were never seen again, swallowed by the desert in ways no one could explain. Historians today estimate that within a span of 5 years, the majority of Sandhaven was completely buried. Yet stories of hidden gold, silver, and personal treasures persisted, driving fortune hunters for decades afterward. After the disappearance of Sandhaven, rumors began circulating. Prospectors, adventurers, and even con men whispered about a town buried beneath the sands, promising treasures beyond imagination. Some claimed that families left behind gold bars beneath floorboards. Others swore silver caches were tucked inside the ruins of old blacksmith shops. Explorers equipped with shovels, rudimentary maps, and a thirst for wealth arrived from across the United States. One 1910 journal from a young treasure hunter named Elias Monroe recounts, "We dug, and each night the desert reclaimed what we uncovered. The wind buried our progress as quickly as we unearthed it. Yet I feel Sandhaven calls to those with persistence, as if the town itself desires to be remembered." Even archaeologists in the mid-20th century attempted excavations. Using early aerial photography, they identified unusual topographical depressions that hinted at sunken streets. Ground surveys and metal detectors revealed remnants of nails, horseshoes, and occasional silver coins, but the town in its entirety remained hidden beneath layers of sand. Local Native American tribes, who had observed the town long before its rise, warned settlers of the desert's unforgiving nature. Some legends suggest that the spirits of those who perished in the storms still wander the dunes, guiding or perhaps warning those who dare to search for what the earth has claimed. Today, Sandhaven serves as a stark reminder of nature's power and the fleeting nature of human ambition. The desert, in reclaiming the town, demonstrated that no matter the wealth accumulated or the effort invested, the environment ultimately decides the fate of human settlements. Historians and storytellers alike emphasize not just the loss of material wealth, but the emotional toll, the displacement of families, the heartbreak of leaving behind everything known, and the psychological scars etched into those who survived. Yet in the story of Sandhaven, there is a glimmer of hope. It reminds us of resilience, the courage to start anew, the spirit to explore, and the humility to respect forces greater than ourselves. Even in its disappearance, Sandhaven continues to teach lessons about human perseverance, the impermanence of civilization, and the mysterious beauty of nature reclaiming what was once taken. Letters from former residents who settled in neighboring towns speak of communities forming bonds over shared tragedy, of rebuilding lives from scratch, and of passing down tales of Sandhaven as cautionary yet inspiring stories for future generations. The desert is a patient thief. It does not rush, does not hesitate, and it remembers everything. By the time the residents of Sandhaven realized the danger, the first seeds of disaster were already rooted in the very soil beneath their feet. The miners' struggle. In the northern outskirts of Sandhaven, where the silver veins gleamed most brightly, miners worked from dawn to dusk, their hands calloused and blackened with ore. They were men driven by hope, but also by desperation. Among them was Samuel Prescott,
a widower who had traveled from the mountains of Colorado after losing his wife to a fever. His only daughter, Lily, became both his joy and his motivation. Samuel's journal entries reveal a man torn between the pursuit of wealth and the well-being of his daughter. Today we struck another vein. The ore is pure, but the wind grows stronger. Lily coughs from the dust. I tell myself riches will keep her safe, yet the desert does not care for gold or sorrow. Families like Samuel's were not alone. Across town, the Harper family, father, mother, and 3 children, worked tirelessly in their general store, supplying miners with everything from pickaxes to flour. The children, Mary, Thomas, and little Ruth, ran errands and played between stacks of barrels, oblivious to the creeping sands. But the desert's approach was subtle at first. Winds that seemed playful became merciless. Dust infiltrated homes, filling cupboards, blankets, and pots. Horses pawed restlessly at corrals half buried in sand. Birds and small wildlife vanished, seeking refuge elsewhere. The atmosphere of town shifted from vibrant to anxious almost overnight. First night of fear. One night in early spring of 1883, a storm unlike any other swept through Sandhaven. Residents awoke to a sound like thousands of rattlesnakes, the wind tearing roofs off homes and hurling sand like molten fire. Samuel held Lily tightly in their small cabin, while outside, the Harpers' roof collapsed under the weight of the desert's fury. A neighbor, Ezekiel Brooks, wrote, "The walls shook, the windows rattled, and I feared for every soul in town. I could hear the cries, the whimpers of children, the prayers of men. We are not alone. Nature watches us, and it is not pleased." By sunrise, the town looked unrecognizable. Streets were buried beneath piles of sand, and only the tallest structures, mostly wooden watchtowers and chimneys, peered above the dunes. Residents tried to dig through the sand, but the desert was relentless, burying their efforts as quickly as they labored. The exodus began. It became clear that Sandhaven could not withstand the storms. One by one, families abandoned homes, taking whatever they could carry. Children clutched dolls and blankets, miners loaded small chests with coins, and merchants tried to salvage merchandise. Yet most wealth and possessions were left behind, swallowed by the sands in moments of desperation. Samuel Prescott, carrying Lily and their belongings, led a small caravan toward the neighboring town of Silver Ridge, leaving behind his mines, his hopes, and his home. Along the way, families trudged through the desert, faces streaked with tears and dust, footsteps leaving fleeting marks that would soon vanish. Many did not make it. Some were overtaken by sandstorms, their cries lost to the wind. Others fell ill, unable to drink the scarce water from dried-up creeks. Journals and letters from survivors reveal heart-wrenching decisions, parents choosing to leave behind treasures to save their children, brothers parting ways to protect loved ones, strangers joining forces to survive the desert together. The disappearance of Sandhaven. Within months, the once thriving town had vanished from sight. Only fleeting signs of human life remained: a half-buried well, a chimney poking through the sand, the twisted frame of a windmill. The desert, patient and unyielding, had reclaimed its territory. Legends grew quickly. Travelers reported strange phenomena, ghostly lights dancing over sand dunes at night, footprints appearing where none could have walked, and whispers of voices carried by the wind. Some believed that those who perished in Sandhaven lingered in the desert, guardians of lost treasure and secret knowledge. Treasure hunters were drawn from across the country. Elijah Morgan, a prospector in 1902, described the town in his diary. "I found signs of life, half-buried barrels, broken tools, a child's shoe. Yet the sands covered everything. It is as if the town never existed. And yet I feel its presence. It watches, waits, and perhaps punishes those who come seeking what was taken by the desert. Families torn apart. The emotional toll of Sandhaven's disappearance cannot be overstated. Families were fragmented, communities scattered. Letters reveal stories of heartbreak. Clara Jensen, who stayed behind longer than most, described watching neighbors leave, unable to join them. I held my grandmother's hand as the dunes crept higher. I could not leave her behind, yet she could not walk. The desert took her first, and then my home. The Harper children, orphaned when both parents succumbed to a sudden illness during the evacuation, were separated and sent to different towns, never reuniting until decades later. Their letters to each other, preserved in historical archives, speak of longing, survival, and the cruel hand of fate. Samuel Prescott and Lily, though they survived, carried lifelong scars. Lily never returned to Sandhaven, and Samuel's journal entries reflect his grief. I traded everything for her life, and yet in my dreams the town stands, laughing, singing, calling me back. The desert stole our home, but it cannot steal memory. Legends and mysteries grew. As decades passed, Sandhaven transformed from a tragic memory into legend. Stories of hidden silver veins and buried gold persisted, drawing curiosity seekers, historians, and thrill seekers. Some claimed that the desert had a rhythm, a pulse that marked where the town's heart once beat. They studied patterns of dunes, sun angles, and wind directions, hoping to locate the lost streets. Others claimed to have found artifacts, coins, nails, and fragments of jewelry, but the town itself remained hidden, as if deliberately concealing its secrets. Native oral histories from tribes in the region spoke of Sandhaven as a cautionary tale. Elders told younger generations, "The desert is patient. It allows men to build and dream, but it does not forgive arrogance or ignorance. Those who seek its treasures without respect are swallowed whole, leaving only footprints that vanish with the wind." A glimpse of hope. Even amid the tragedy, Sandhaven inspired stories of resilience. Survivors rebuilt lives in neighboring towns. Communities formed from those displaced, carrying forward traditions, skills, and memories. They shared tales of the lost town, ensuring that its lessons endured. By the early 20th century, some descendants of Sandhaven's residents became local leaders, teachers, and miners in other regions, carrying with them the knowledge and grit forged in the harsh desert environment. They spoke of Sandhaven with reverence, sorrow, and an unspoken hope that the town's secrets would one day be uncovered. Explorers and amateur historians in the modern era continue to search for Sandhaven. Using satellite imagery, LiDAR scans, and advanced archaeological techniques, small signs of human settlement have been detected, but no complete excavation has succeeded. The desert, patient and unyielding, remains the ultimate keeper of Sandhaven's story.
The night the desert roared. The summer of 1883 was one of Sandhaven's darkest. Residents had grown accustomed to minor storms, but nothing could prepare them for the night when the desert seemed to roar with a life of its own. It began around dusk. A low hum rolled across the sand dunes, growing into a deafening roar. Families huddled in homes, clutching whatever they could carry. Windows rattled violently, doors buckled, and dust infiltrated every crevice. Horses screamed in their stalls, dogs barked frantically, children cried, terrified by the violence of nature. In the northern mining sector, Samuel Prescott's cabin faced imminent collapse. He wrapped Lily in blankets and tied ropes around furniture, anchoring it as best he could. Outside, miners tried desperately to secure equipment. The ground trembled with each gust, and sand cascaded over rooftops like waves in a storm-tossed sea. The wind carried more than sand. It carried screams, the sound of timber splintering, and the cries of animals caught in the chaos. One miner, Harrison Cole, described the night in his journal. "I thought the world had ended. Trees bent like grass. Dust filled my lungs. I held on to my brother and whispered prayers I did not know I believed. And still, the desert claimed everything." By morning, entire sections of Sandhaven were buried under 6 feet of sand. Families emerged to find their streets erased, homes unrecognizable, and neighbors missing. The desert had advanced inexorably, swallowing the town like a living entity. Heroic acts and dramatic rescues. Amidst despair, acts of heroism emerged. One of the most remembered was Clara Jensen, who braved the storm to rescue 2 children trapped under a collapsed roof. She navigated shifting sand drifts, collapsed beams, and gusting wind to pull them to safety. For her bravery, she became a local legend, though the storm ultimately forced her family to leave Sandhaven behind. Samuel Prescott, too, faced impossible choices. On a particularly deadly afternoon, Lily's cries led him to a half-buried neighbor, Old Man Whitaker, whose leg was trapped beneath a collapsed structure. Using ropes and sheer determination, Samuel freed him, risking his own life as another sandstorm loomed. Whitaker would later recount, "I thought death was certain, but Samuel's courage was the only thing that kept me alive. He reminded me that even in the face of hopelessness, one can choose to fight." These stories spread quickly among survivors, passed along in letters and whispered conversations in Silver Ridge, Silver Springs, and other nearby settlements. They became tales of human perseverance and the courage to face nature's wrath, inspiring generations long after Sandhaven disappeared. Romantic tragedies in the desert. Not all stories were about survival. Some were about love lost and hope deferred. Among these was the tragic romance of Thomas Harper and Elizabeth Monroe, 2 young adults from Sandhaven who had secretly vowed to marry. Thomas worked in the general store with his family. Elizabeth was the daughter of a local blacksmith. Their romance blossomed amid the town's daily bustle, shared moments in quiet gardens, and stolen glances by the creeks that flowed intermittently through the desert. When the sandstorms began, their relationship was tested. During a particularly violent storm, Thomas went missing while attempting to rescue a neighbor's trapped mule. Elizabeth spent days searching, only to find evidence that he had been buried under shifting sands. Heartbroken, she eventually fled with other townsfolk, carrying Thomas's memory like a torch. Letters she wrote later in Silver Ridge expressed the emotional weight of that loss. "The desert took him before I could say goodbye. Every wind reminds me of his absence, yet I cling to the hope that somewhere in another life he waits." These personal tragedies humanized the broader disaster, adding layers of sorrow and depth to Sandhaven's story. The psychological toll on those who survived Sandhaven was profound. Survivors reported recurring nightmares of being trapped beneath sand, of houses collapsing, of children calling for help in voices that never reached their ears. Psychologists today theorize that these early survivors likely experienced trauma similar to modern PTSD. Samuel Prescott's journals, when revisited decades later, reveal a man haunted by the desert, unable to return to his old home, and perpetually vigilant when near sand-laden terrain. Yet, even in the aftermath of trauma, communities formed bonds of resilience. People who survived together often became lifelong friends, their shared experiences forging relationships stronger than those built in peace. The desert's relentless grip. While the human drama unfolded, the desert continued its slow conquest. By 1885, maps of Sandhaven were outdated. The post office closed, miners abandoned claims, and the town's schoolhouse was buried beneath dunes. Treasure hunters arriving years later often stumbled upon strange anomalies: half-buried fences, wooden beams,
fragments of furniture, and coins peeking through sand layers. Some reported mysterious lights at night, moving seemingly with intelligence, leading some to speculate that Sandhaven's spirits lingered. Explorers' reports often blend fact and folklore. 1920s adventurer account. I followed a ridge and found a small square depression in the sand. Digging revealed shards of pottery and the rusted remains of a wheelbarrow. I felt eyes upon me, and a sudden gust threw me backward. I swear the town did not want to be found. 1950s archaeology memoir. Even with careful mapping, the desert resisted our efforts. Each excavation uncovered minor artifacts, yet the town remained hidden, as if the wind itself protected its secrets. Legends of hidden treasures. The allure of Sandhaven persisted because of stories of lost treasure. Families fleeing in haste reportedly buried gold, silver, and valuable possessions to retrieve later, but the desert claimed it first. Some treasure hunters believe Sandhaven's wealth remains intact under hundreds of feet of sand. Modern technology like LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar have revealed unusual formations, suggesting streets, foundations, and even wells may still exist beneath the dunes. Yet no large-scale excavation has succeeded. Local lore often warns, but desert does not forgive greed. Many early treasure hunters reportedly vanished or returned empty-handed, physically unharmed but shaken by what they claimed were strange phenomena: voices in the wind, unexplained shadows, and sudden sand collapses. The ghostly echoes. Stories of ghostly sightings grew over decades. Travelers spoke of shadowy figures at dusk, faint laughter drifting across dunes, and fleeting glimpses of people moving through buried streets. Whether these were hallucinations, memories, or supernatural events remains unknown, but they cemented Sandhaven as a town that refused to vanish completely from collective memory. Legacy of the survivors. Even as Sandhaven disappeared physically, the spirit of the town lived on. Survivors and descendants spread across the West, carrying with them stories, skills, and traditions forged in adversity. Samuel Prescott settled in Silver Ridge, raising Lily and teaching other children about resilience, hope, and respect for nature. Clara Jensen became a nurse, dedicating her life to helping those affected by natural disasters, inspired by her experiences in Sandhaven. Elizabeth Monroe never married, but she devoted herself to community service, often sharing tales of lost love and survival to teach empathy and courage. Their experiences shaped the culture of nearby towns, creating communities that revered Sandhaven not just as a cautionary tale, but as a source of inspiration and human endurance.
The first expeditions. By the early 20th century, stories of Sandhaven had spread across the United States. Treasure hunters, adventurers, and curious historians became obsessed with the town buried beneath the dunes. One of the earliest documented expeditions occurred in 1907, led by Professor Edmund Harlow, a geographer fascinated by frontier towns lost to natural disasters. Harlow assembled a small team, bringing shovels, pickaxes, and rudimentary surveying equipment. The first challenge was the desert itself. With shifting sands and sudden sandstorms, every step required caution. Harlow recorded in his journal, "We attempted to locate the main street, but the dunes refused to reveal their secrets. It is as though Sandhaven is alive, choosing what to allow us to find." Despite weeks of labor, only fragments of the town were uncovered: collapsed fences, a partially buried water well, and rusted tools. These minor discoveries, however, were enough to ignite public fascination and attract more expeditions in subsequent decades. Modern archaeology meets old legends. In the 1950s and 60s, archaeological methods became more sophisticated.
Satellite imagery and early ground-penetrating technology hinted at grid-like formations beneath the dunes, suggesting streets, building foundations, and possible cellars. One archaeologist, Dr. Martha Whitfield, wrote, "We could detect anomalies in the sand that corresponded to known structures from early maps of Sandhaven. Yet the town refuses to fully reveal itself. Each excavation seems guided by the desert's whims rather than our scientific intent." Whitfield's team uncovered small treasures, coins, fragments of pottery, and personal items, but the larger secrets, such as the rumored gold caches, remained elusive. The desert's ability to hide and reclaim was almost supernatural in its precision. The curse of greed? Stories of vanished treasure hunters became part of Sandhaven's lore. Between 1920 and 1970, at least a dozen documented cases exist of individuals or groups disappearing while attempting to unearth Sandhaven's secrets. Some were found days later, physically unharmed, but with stories of strange phenomena, sudden whirlwinds, voices in the dunes, and visions of people long gone. One particularly chilling account comes from Henry Morgan in 1943. "I saw a woman standing in the sand, calling my name. I knew she was not alive, yet I felt compelled to follow her. Hours later, I emerged, my tools buried, my hands blistered. I left Sandhaven that day, vowing never to return. I understood then, this place has a will of its own." Historians and paranormal researchers have debated these stories for decades. While some dismiss them as hallucinations caused by heat, exhaustion, or isolation, others believe the desert preserves the memory of Sandhaven's residents in a mysterious, almost karmic way. Karma and realization. For the families of Sandhaven, the desert's reclamation seemed almost like nature's judgment. Letters from survivors reveal a common thread, acknowledgement of human arrogance. Samuel Prescott wrote, "We believed we could tame the desert. We did not understand its power, nor did we respect its patience. Now all that remains is memory, and the desert laughs at our folly." Clara Jensen, reflecting on her family's losses, wrote, "Our greed for security and comfort blinded us. The desert did not punish us individually, but as a town, we learned the cost of overreaching without wisdom." These realizations became embedded in the folklore surrounding Sandhaven. Tales of greed, courage, and survival were passed down, often emphasizing humility, respect for nature, and the impermanence of human achievement. The lost treasures of Sandhaven. Legends of hidden wealth persisted. Residents fleeing the town reportedly buried valuables to return later, but the desert overtook everything. Over the years, treasure hunters claimed to have found silver coins, small chests, and jewelry fragments. None reported uncovering significant caches of gold, leading some to speculate that the desert itself had absorbed the town's riches, leaving only traces. In 1972, a group of adventurers using early metal detectors uncovered a partially buried cellar. Inside were rusted tools, broken chairs, and faded letters. Among them, a small journal entry caught their attention. "To whomever finds this, may you understand that Sandhaven is not for the greedy. The desert takes as it pleases. Respect it, or it will take you too." Many historians view this as the closest encounter with Sandhaven's spirit, a tangible reminder that the town was as much about lessons and memories as it was about material wealth. The human stories preserved. Despite the town being buried, its human stories survived. Accounts from families who resettled elsewhere are invaluable for understanding Sandhaven's life and eventual disappearance. The Harpers' children reunited in adulthood, sharing recollections of playtime in streets now under 6 feet of sand. Survivors often recounted acts of bravery, loss, and resilience. Clara Jensen's daring rescues, Samuel Prescott's protection of Lily, and countless nameless neighbors who chose courage over despair. These narratives provide a window into the emotional landscape of Sandhaven, emphasizing the human cost of natural disaster and the enduring spirit of those who survived. Sandhaven in popular culture. By the late 19th century, Sandhaven had entered American legend. Writers, filmmakers, and historians referenced it as an example of a lost frontier town, buried not by fire or invasion, but by the relentless forces of nature. Books described ghostly apparitions, buried treasures, and the human drama that unfolded in the town. Documentaries highlighted archaeological expeditions, blending factual discoveries with folklore, creating a narrative that was at once heartbreaking, thrilling, and inspiring. The town's legacy became more than a historical curiosity. It became a cultural symbol of human ambition, hubris, and the power of nature to humble even the most determined settlers. The eternal mystery. Today, Sandhaven remains buried beneath layers of sand, resisting all attempts to fully uncover it. Scholars continue to debate its location, significance, and the truth behind ghost stories. Amateur historians and treasure hunters continue to search, drawn by a mix of curiosity, greed, and reverence. Yet the desert remains in control. Footprints vanish within hours. Structures crumble before excavation can reveal them. The town, in essence, continues to live under the sand, a silent witness to the lives, loves, and struggles of those who once called it home. Some theorists believe that the desert preserves Sandhaven as a lesson for humanity, that life is fragile, wealth is temporary, and nature is the ultimate arbiter of fate.
Rediscovering Sandhaven. By the early 2000s, Sandhaven had become both a legend and an obsession. Modern technology allowed explorers to scan areas that had been inaccessible for decades. Satellite imagery, aerial surveys, and ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies that hinted at what could be Sandhaven beneath the dunes. In 2003, a team led by Dr. Emily Carter, a historian and geographer, embarked on a careful expedition. She later recounted, "For years I had read the accounts, letters, diaries, and legends. Standing at the edge of the dunes, I could feel the weight of history. Sandhaven is not just a town buried in sand, it is a repository of human experience, joy, tragedy, and resilience." Using LiDAR technology, her team detected patterns beneath the sand that suggested streets, foundations, and wells. Unlike previous expeditions, they took great care to preserve the site, understanding that any disturbance could erase critical historical evidence forever. Emotional flashbacks of the survivors. The team also interviewed descendants of Sandhaven's residents. Their stories were filled with vivid memories and emotional weight. One descendant, Lydia Prescott, granddaughter of Samuel Prescott, described her father's recollections. "He spoke often of the desert's cruelty, but also its beauty. My father would describe the laughter of children, the smell of freshly baked bread in the general store, and the songs miners would hum after a day's work. Sandhaven was alive in ways that the desert cannot fully erase." Other descendants shared letters and diaries, offering glimpses into moments of hope amid despair. Clara Jensen's journal, preserved by her family, recounted her daring rescue of 2 children trapped under collapsing sand, a story that had inspired generations of nurses in her community.
Elizabeth Monroe's letters expressed the heartbreak of losing her true love, Thomas Harper, while emphasizing resilience and service to the community despite tragedy. These emotional flashbacks gave modern explorers a unique window into the human dimension of Sandhaven. It was no longer merely a town, it was a living memory of lives, struggles, and dreams interrupted by the desert. Suspenseful treasure hunts. Despite the historical focus, Sandhaven's legends of treasure drew adventurers. Some were motivated by wealth, others by curiosity, and a few by obsession. In 2010, an amateur historian, Jacob Fields, organized a private excavation. He found rusted tools, fragments of pottery, and a partially buried chest, though it contained only personal belongings, letters and coins of little monetary value. Yet Fields insisted the experience was transformative. The desert does not reward greed. What I found was far more valuable, a tangible connection to lives once lived, struggles endured, and the impermanence of human ambition. The stories of failed treasure hunters, some vanishing and others returning empty-handed, continued to reinforce the aura of mystery. Some locals whispered that Sandhaven itself protected its secrets, revealing only what it wished. The desert's lessons. For historians and explorers, Sandhaven became a case study in human resilience and the unpredictability of nature. The desert's reclaiming of the town serves as a reminder that no amount of planning, wealth, or effort can fully conquer natural forces. One archaeologist, Dr. Harold Benson, reflected on this in a 2015 lecture. Sandhaven teaches us humility. It is a monument to human endeavor and its limits. Every artifact, every buried home, and every letter reminds us that nature will always have the final say. Even the descendants of the original settlers embraced this lesson. Many used their ancestors' stories to teach respect for the environment, perseverance through hardship, and the importance of community. Heartbreaking tales. Among the most emotional aspects of Sandhaven are the untold personal stories of loss. Diaries and letters preserve moments of heartbreak that are almost cinematic in quality. A mother wrote of leaving her home behind as sand buried her child's favorite toys. A miner's journal recounts the anguish of abandoning a vein of silver he had spent years excavating. Children described watching neighbors disappear into sandstorms, the memory haunting them for decades. These stories are not just historical records, they are human experiences, capturing love, hope, and suffering. They create a narrative that resonates deeply with modern audiences, connecting the past to universal emotions. Building toward the climax. As the 21st century progressed, Sandhaven became both a historical site and a symbol. The desert had buried the town, yet its stories persisted. Every expedition, discovery, or retold memory added layers to its legend. Modern scholars emphasized three key lessons. Impermanence. Sandhaven is a stark reminder that human achievement is fragile. Resilience. Survivors and descendants demonstrate the enduring power of human spirit. Respect for nature. The desert reclaimed what it considered its own, teaching humility and reverence. By now, the town had become an icon, not merely of loss, but of humanity's ability to endure, adapt, and remember. The final chapters of Sandhaven's story are not about uncovering buried gold or physical remains, but about understanding its emotional, cultural, and historical significance. Descendants continue to tell the tales of bravery, sacrifice, and survival. Scholars highlight the lessons of hubris, nature's power, and the fleeting nature of material wealth. Treasure hunters continue to search, some motivated by greed, others by curiosity, but all ultimately reminded of Sandhaven's enduring mystery. Sandhaven exists today as both a physical mystery beneath the sand and a timeless emotional legacy, a town that, though buried, continues to teach, inspire, and captivate.
By the 2020s, Sandhaven had cemented its place in history, not as a thriving mining town, but as a symbol of human ambition, loss, and endurance. Modern explorers and historians approach the desert with respect, documenting every artifact, every anomaly, and every story carefully. Dr. Emily Carter, reflecting on her 2003 expedition, described Sandhaven as a living memory beneath the sand. She emphasized that the town's true treasure was not material wealth, but the stories, emotions, and lessons preserved through generations. Indeed, while some explorers hoped to unearth silver veins or gold caches, they often left with only fragments, coins, tools, or letters. Yet these fragments told powerful stories of perseverance, heartbreak, and hope. Descendants of Sandhaven's original residents continued to share oral histories and family documents. Their recollections revealed the human dimension of Sandhaven, the essence that the desert could not bury. Samuel Prescott's lineage spoke of his unwavering dedication to protect his daughter, Lily, as a symbol of resilience. His survival represented hope amid destruction. Elizabeth Monroe's descendants carried forward stories of lost love and the emotional scars caused by the desert, teaching empathy and community service. Clara Jensen's family highlighted acts of courage that became legendary, inspiring generations of caregivers and first responders in other towns. These personal narratives remind us that Sandhaven was more than buildings and streets. It was a collection of lives, hopes, dreams, and human spirit. Sandhaven and the Lessons of Nature. Sandhaven's ultimate fate is a reminder that human settlements are fragile in the face of nature's power. The desert, patient and relentless, reclaimed the town gradually but inexorably. Geologists studying the region emphasized that the sandstorms which buried Sandhaven were part of natural desert cycles, intensified by climate patterns, wind shifts, and seasonal storms. While human hubris attempted to conquer the environment, Sandhaven ultimately succumbed. Modern historians interpret this as a lesson in humility and foresight. The town's story reminds us that survival is not guaranteed by wealth, skill, or determination alone. Nature must be respected, and communities must adapt with foresight. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Sandhaven is its emotional resonance. Tales of love, loss, heroism, and struggle remain timeless. Children separated from families, yet reunited decades later. Couples torn apart by sandstorms, yet remembered in letters and diaries. Brave individuals risking their lives to save neighbors, leaving a legacy of courage that transcends generations. These narratives strike a chord even today, making Sandhaven's story relatable and deeply moving. Audiences can connect with the universal themes of loss, perseverance, and the fragile beauty of human life. Even now, Sandhaven retains its mystique. Archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters cautiously explore the area, uncovering small remnants that hint at the town's former existence. Tools, coins, and household items continue to emerge from the sands. Occasional unexplained phenomena, shifting sands, fleeting shadows, and whispers carried by the wind spark speculation about supernatural elements. Researchers emphasize that the town's mysteries are unlikely to be fully solved, ensuring Sandhaven's story will endure for generations. The enduring enigma adds to the allure, making Sandhaven both a historical and cultural treasure.
reflections on human struggle and resilience. Sandhaven is ultimately a story about human resilience. The desert may have buried the town physically, but the people's experiences, struggles, and lessons live on. Survivors adapted to new towns, building communities informed by the hardships of Sandhaven. Descendants preserved stories, ensuring that acts of courage and tragedy were never forgotten. The town became a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, reminding us that while human life is fragile, the spirit endures. The story of Sandhaven exemplifies the intersection of natural forces, human ambition, and the enduring power of memory. Today, Sandhaven is remembered as 1. A historical cautionary tale, illustrating the impermanence of human settlements. 2. A cultural symbol, representing the emotional and spiritual legacies of those who lived there. 3. A mystery and legend, continuing to intrigue treasure hunters, historians, and adventurers alike. Its lessons resonate beyond the American West, reminding us that no civilization or individual is immune to the forces of nature, and that human resilience is often measured not by wealth or power, but by courage, love, and perseverance. As the sun sets over the shifting dunes of the Old West, the story of Sandhaven emerges, not from the sand, but from memory. Every whisper of wind, every fragment uncovered, and every tale passed down reminds us of a town that once thrived, loved, struggled, and ultimately surrendered to the desert. Sandhaven teaches us life is fleeting, and what we leave behind may vanish without warning. True wealth lies in courage, love, and resilience. Nature is patient, powerful, and ultimately in control. Buried under the sand, Sandhaven continues to speak to us. Its streets, homes, and lives may lie beneath layers of sand, but its story, heartbreaking, emotional, and inspiring, remains alive, waiting for those willing to listen. Sandhaven may never be fully uncovered, but its lessons endure. The town, buried beneath the relentless sandstorms of the Old West, stands as a monument to human ambition, loss, love, and survival. Every explorer, historian, and descendant who studies it learns not just about the town itself, but about the human spirit, the courage to dream, the strength to endure, and the humility to respect forces greater than ourselves. And so, the hidden town buried under Old West sandstorms continues to live in stories, in hearts, and in the timeless desert that guards its secrets. Want more lost history and untold stories? Subscribe and follow Untold Golden History, where the past comes alive.